Imagine sitting in a TV studio in the summer of 1972, the lights blinding, the cameras rolling, and a live audience waiting for a spectacle. The name on everyone's lips is Bumpy Johnson, the legendary godfather of Harlem, a man whose reputation for power, loyalty, and fear still haunted the streets 4 years after his death. People remember the stories, the violence, the protection he gave his neighborhood, the schools he saved, the families he helped. But today, the story is about his widow, My Johnson, a woman who carried the weight of his legacy with quiet dignity. Across from her sits Catherine Kitty Carroll, the star of daytime television, known for sharp questions, clever traps, and a thirst for ratings. Kitty had built her career on exposing secrets, on peeling away layers of public facades. And she had her sights set on My Johnson. The invitation to appear on her show seemed innocent at first. Talk about Bumpy's charitable work, the good he did for Harlem. But My knew better. The media doesn't play fair, and Kitty Carroll's smile hit a predator ready to dig for scandal. As the cameras start rolling, the tension in the studio is electric. The audience expects a sobbing widow, a victim of circumstance, perhaps even a confession. But My Johnson is nothing like that. She walks onto the stage in a striking emerald green suit, pearls around her neck, and a calm, unshakable presence. She doesn't bow to the lights, the cameras, or the questions. The room quiets as she sits, poised, carrying more authority than the host herself. Kitty begins, her voice smooth, almost teasing, asking about Bumpy Johnson, his life, and his legacy. The conversation starts politely, but then the questions turn sharper. The rumors come out. The accusations that Bumpy was a rat, that he betrayed his friends, that his life of power was built on lies. The audience leans in. The tension is unbearable. My Johnson doesn't flinch. She listens, silent, letting the accusations hang in the air like smoke. Then, in a moment that would change everything, she reaches into her purse and produces something from Bumpy's secret archives, a photograph, a piece of evidence long kept hidden, proof that shifts the power in the room completely. Kitty Carroll, the confident, untouchable star of daytime TV, pales instantly. The audience senses a shift but can't yet see what's about to happen. The cameras keep rolling. The red on air light glows. The studio freezes in suspense. My Johnson is about to reveal something that will shake everyone watching. The truth behind the rumors, the lies that haunted Bumpy Johnson's name, and a secret that not even the city's most famous host was prepared for. In the blink of an eye, everything changes, and then the screen goes black. In the next moments, no one in the studio knows what will happen, and millions watching at home are left with a cliffhanger that would haunt New York. The story of Bumpy Johnson,
the report confirms our fears.
And the day a TV host misjudged the wrong woman,
we need to act
only
immediately.
Beginning.
I understand.
The real question is, what happens when the story of My Johnson and who doesn't survives
start
on
on
that stage? It starts in Harlem, years earlier, when Bumpy was still alive, walking those same streets that had seen both hope and danger. He wasn't just a gangster, not in the way the newspapers like to claim, to the people of Harlem. He was a protector, a man who could make the crooked system bend just enough to give families a chance to pay rent, to feed children. And standing beside him was My, calm, intelligent, and unshakable, the kind of woman who could match his strength without ever firing a shot. After Bumpy's death in 1968, Harlem felt emptier, but My stayed. She didn't leave the neighborhood, didn't sell the apartment or chase the promise of quiet life elsewhere. She carried the weight of history and memory, the responsibility of making sure Bumpy's name was remembered correctly. While the city around her changed, the blocks decayed, and the new gangs and dealers moved in, she kept the apartment just as it had been. Furniture under plastic, the smell of lemon polish and lavender still lingering, a fortress of quiet dignity. When the invitation from Kitty Carroll arrived, it seemed like an opportunity at first glance, a chance to share the other side of Bumpy's story, to tell the public that the man they had feared was also the man who had given schools, paid rent, and protected his people. But My recognized the trap immediately. She had seen journalists before, the kind who pretended to listen while waiting for a chance to strike. She knew the studio would be their hunting ground. The lights, the microphones, the audience. It was all a game designed to catch her off balance. Junebug, the last of Bumpy's old guards, knew it too. He had grown older, slower, but he still carried the instincts of the streets. when Mai showed him the invitation. He shook his head. "Yeah, you don't go into that studio unarmed," he warned. But she wasn't armed in the usual way. Her weapon was knowledge. Her shield was truth. And her courage was the kind that comes from a lifetime of walking beside a man who never backed down. As they left Harlem and entered the canyons of Midtown, Mike could feel the change in the air. The streets were different here. The asphalt was hot, the skyscrapers towering, the energy sharp and unwelcoming. The world Kitty Carroll controlled was unfamiliar to Mai, but that didn't make her afraid. She had lived through threats that made police reports look tame. She had buried Bumpy with her head held high, while the city whispered rumors. And now, she was about to confront those whispers, those lies, in a place that seemed designed to silence her. The studio was already buzzing when they arrived. Crew members rushed past, audience members whispered and craned their necks, and cameras tilted toward the wings, ready to capture every movement. Mai's heart was steady, but behind her calm exterior, a storm of anticipation and strategy swirled. She wasn't just walking onto a stage. She was walking into a battlefield where words were the weapons, and only the cleverest and the strongest would survive.
The pleasure is mine.
Every step toward that chair,
I'm ready.
Every flash of the camera reminded her of the delicate balance between fear and respect, truth and perception. She carried the weight of Bumpy's name, the expectations of Harlem, and the hidden secrets of the city in her hands. And somewhere in that room, behind Kitty's confident smile, the first cracks were beginning to show, though no one yet knew how deep they would run. The cameras clicked on again, the red, on-air light blinking like a warning in the darkness of the studio. Kitty Carroll leaned forward, her smile sharpened into something closer to a predator's snarl. The audience sat in anticipation, sensing the tension even before words were exchanged. Mai Johnson remained poised, her hands folded neatly in her lap, her eyes calm but unflinching. She knew the game. She had seen this kind of performance before, not just in studios, but in courtrooms, in alleys, in boardrooms. The difference this time was that she wasn't just defending Bumpy's name. She was defending truth itself. Kitty tried a soft approach first, asking about Bumpy's charitable work. But the question carried an edge, a subtle insinuation. The audience responded with polite applause, but Mai felt the trap. Every compliment was a hook, every question a potential ambush. The subtext was clear. "We know what your husband did. Tell us about the blood money." Mai didn't rise to the bait. She answered calmly, weaving the story of Bumpy's protection of Harlem's families, the rent he covered for struggling tenants, and the schools he had helped keep open. She painted a picture of a man far more complex than the caricature the media had built. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Junebug watched every movement. He could see Kitty calculating, measuring Mai, weighing when to strike. He could see the tension in the audience, the way people leaned forward in their seats, craving scandal, craving drama. To him, it was dangerous. The studio was a battlefield, and although no guns were drawn, the stakes were higher than in the streets. A wrong word, a single misstep, and the widow of Bumpy Johnson could be humiliated, her reputation torn apart by tabloids and talk show clips that would loop endlessly on the evening news. Kitty switched tactics, bringing up the rumors of Bumpy being a rat, a snitch, insinuating that he had betrayed friends to the FBI. The audience gasped. Cameras shifted, capturing Mai's reaction. She didn't flinch. Her calm, unshakable presence was more intimidating than any raised fist. She knew the rumors. She knew the lies. They had been circulating for years. And now, she had the leverage to expose the cracks in Kitty's own carefully constructed persona. As the confrontation escalated, subplots bubbled beneath the surface. The network executives whispered furiously in the wings, debating whether to cut the feed. Producers scanned the audience, worried about reactions. Some viewers, watching from home, began calling in, eager to know if the accusations would finally be revealed. In Harlem, people whispered about the appearance, speculating what Mai would say, whether she would uphold Bumpy's honor or fold under pressure. The tension reached its peak when Mai reached into her purse and touched the edge of the object she had been holding close all along. The studio seemed to hold its breath. Everyone
You knew
knew
about
something
this
was
all
coming,
along, didn't
but
you?
no one could
I
predict
swear I
what.
had no idea.
The story,
Don't lie to me.
the
The proof is right
accusation,
here.
and the secret that had been waiting for years were about to collide. and the collision promised to shatter more than just reputations. The studio felt smaller now, the lights hotter, the hum of the cameras louder, like a heartbeat growing faster in the chest of everyone watching. Kitty Carroll leaned forward, sensing something was about to happen, though she didn't know what. Her polished facade began to crack, the practiced warmth of her smile faltering. Bumpy Johnson sat perfectly still, her green silk jacket catching the glare of the stage lights, her eyes locked on Kitty. She didn't rush. She never did. She understood that the most dangerous weapon in a war of words was timing. Junebug stood behind her, silent but vigilant, his eyes scanning the room. He could feel the tension radiating from the audience, a mix of curiosity, fear, and excitement. Some of the viewers at home probably had no idea the danger they were witnessing, the unspoken threat lurking in every sentence. The cameras rolled, but the control was slipping from the hands of producers. They had prepared for a controlled interview, a segment of curiosity and mild controversy. They hadn't prepared for a widow with the precision of a general and the calm of someone who had lived through gunfire and betrayal. Kitty tried again, softer this time, her voice a calculated blend of charm and pressure. "Mrs. Johnson, surely you must understand, the public wants answers. We've heard stories, rumors. The man you love has been called many things, but these claims of betrayal..." Her words trailed, leaving the accusation hanging like a noose in the air. The audience leaned in. The murmurs grew. Every eye was fixed on Mai, waiting for the faintest flicker of doubt, the moment she might falter. But Mai didn't falter. She shifted slightly, just enough to reach into her purse. The studio seemed to exhale with her. The air thickened with anticipation. Everyone could feel that what was about to come would change everything. The tension was not just in the words. It was in the silence that preceded them. The cameras caught every twitch of Kitty's hands, every blink, every nervous glance toward the floor. The production crew in the wings held their
Ready
breath.
for the segment?
The network executives
Yes, let's go over the
turned
cues.
into urgent
Good,
murmurs,
graphics are cued.
knowing that
Perfect.
whatever Bumpy Johnson did next could break the story wide open, in ways no one could control. Junebug's hand hovered near her shoulder, a reminder that danger could strike from anywhere. Yet, Mai's attention never wavered. She held the gaze of Kitty Carroll, the woman who had tried to control the narrative for years, the woman who had built her fame on putting others on trial for sins and mistakes. Mai knew every secret, every rumor, every calculated lie. And now, the moment of confrontation had arrived. The audience sensed it. The studio lights seemed too bright, the air too still. Every second stretched longer. Mai's hand tightened slightly on the object in her purse. The weight of history, of Bumpy's legacy, of years of whispered lies and false stories, pressed down on her. And then she opened her mouth, slowly, deliberately, ready to shatter the illusions, ready to expose the truth, ready to strike at the heart of Kitty Carroll's empire. Bumpy Johnson's fingers brushed the edge of the small, black object in her purse, a simple envelope that carried more weight than any gun or threat. The studio felt electrified, like the air itself had been compressed into a tense wire. Kitty Carroll's eyes flicked to it, the first real sign of fear breaking through her carefully maintained veneer. She leaned forward instinctively, her manicured nails tapping the armrest, sensing that this was not going to be an ordinary interview. The audience, thousands of eyes on the cameras at home, had no idea how close they were to witnessing a scandal that could topple a media empire. Before Mike could speak, the teleprompter flickered unexpectedly.
We must not forget
showing
him.
a line
His
of
voice
text
was
that hadn't
silenced,
been
but his
scheduled.
message lives on.
A leaked
Look at his
message
face.
from
He
the
stood
network's
for all of us.
producers. Do not reveal anything regarding Marcus. Stop now. The message vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving the crew in panic and the audience oblivious. Mai's calm eyes narrowed. She knew then that the network had been planning to control her, to trap her, but she wasn't just a widow. She was a strategist. Kitty's voice trembled slightly now, betraying her composure. "Mrs. Johnson, what are you doing? That's private." She trailed off, unsure whether to raise her voice or retreat. The audience could sense the imbalance, the shift in power. Mai stood, her posture unshakable. "Private?" she said, her voice low but carrying across the studio. "Nothing about the truth is private, Miss Carroll." Then, in a sudden twist, a stagehand burst in the green room from the wings, clutching a manila folder. "Mrs. Johnson, "You need to see this." My eyes met Junebug's. He stiffened, alert, sensing something dangerous, but she waved him off. She took the folder, flipping it open carefully. Inside were photographs, documents, and letters she had never seen before. Evidence that linked not only Kitty to a network of influence and corruption, but also hinted at deep, long-buried connections to organized crime in Manhattan. The audience, even without seeing the documents, felt the tension spike. The air seemed to hum with anticipation. Kitty's face drained of color. Her perfect makeup streaked as her lips pressed together.
Stand by,
in
we're
panic.
going live.
She tried
Copy,
to
queuing
recover,
graphics.
to
Feed
regain
from DC
control.
as levels are
But
peaking.
mine now
Adjust.
held the upper hand, not just morally, but strategically. The network executives, frantically trying to regain composure, whispered furiously into headsets, signaling crew to cut the commercial. But the cameras continued to roll, capturing every second of Kitty's unraveling. Junebug's hand hovered near mine, ready to intervene, but she stopped him. She didn't need protection now. She had leverage. She had the proof. And she was about to reveal it in a way that would leave the studio and the world in shock. I took a deep breath, her eyes glinting with a dangerous resolve. "It's time the truth came out," she said softly. But the weight of what she was about to expose promised to shake more than just Kitty's reputation. The lights blazed, the cameras rolled, and for the first time, the audience realized this was no ordinary confrontation. This was a reckoning, and it was far from over. My Johnson stood in the center of the stage, the folder of evidence clutched firmly in her hands. The studio lights beat down on her, casting sharp shadows across the floor. Kitty Carroll sat frozen in her chair, her wide-eyed panic spreading like a contagion across the audience. For the first time, she was no longer the one in control. Every carefully constructed story, every calculated smile, every manufactured pause, the illusion had collapsed. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, her voice calm but sharp, carrying across the cavernous studio, "what you've seen tonight is not just about my husband, Bumpy Johnson. It's about truth."
Madam, your
about who
statement on the
decides what gets
allegations?
told and who
No
gets
comment at this
silenced.
time. When will you
She
address
lifted the
it?
first photo from a folder, a grainy black and white image of Kitty Carroll handing a man an envelope of cash. The audience gasped. Cameras zoomed in. Even those at home could feel the weight of the moment. Kitty tried to speak, to protest, but her words faltered. Her empire of words, built on interrogation and spectacle, could not withstand the evidence laid bare. Mike continued methodically, laying out the documents showing Kitty's connection to the disappearance of Marcus, the young mailroom worker, and the cover-up that had kept him missing for years. Every photograph, every note, every affidavit was like a hammer striking down the walls Kitty had built around herself. Junebug stood quietly behind a silent sentinel, watching the reactions of the audience, the crew, the executives scrambling in the wings. The once feared host of daytime television was now reduced to a figure of fear and shame. "This isn't about revenge," I said, her eyes meeting Kitty's. "This is about justice, about clearing a name that's been dragged to the mud for too long." The network tried to intervene, calling for a cut, but the moment had already passed beyond their control. The audience was rapt, the tension almost unbearable. They weren't just watching an interview. They were witnessing a reckoning. I had turned the tables, using the very tools of the media to expose the truth rather than be crushed by it. By the next morning, the fallout was unavoidable. The photograph and affidavits had reached the offices of the district attorney and every major news outlet. New York Now went off the air indefinitely. Advertisers pulled out. Kitty Carroll was forced to face investigations into conspiracy and obstruction, her career crumbling under the weight of her own secrets. Meanwhile, my Johnson returned home to Harlem, where the streets whispered stories of the widow who had outsmarted the city that had tried to destroy her. She didn't celebrate. She didn't flaunt her victory. Instead, she walked through her neighborhood quietly, greeting old friends and neighbors who had waited decades to see justice done. Children played in the streets, and older men tipped their hats respectfully. Bumpy's legacy, she realized, was not in money or power, but in the truth. He had built a life of protection, charity, and loyalty, values that could not be erased by slander or sensationalism. Sitting in her apartment later that evening, I carefully placed a folder back in her safe. She lit Bumpy's old Zippo lighter and watched as a single candle flickered in the dim room. The city outside was loud, chaotic, and ever-changing, but inside, the air was calm. She sipped her tea and let herself breathe. She had honored Bumpy, preserved his reputation, and reminded the world that even in a city full of lies and betrayal, truth could be defended. Years would pass, and Mai remained the quiet guardian of Harlem's history. She never remarried, never sought fame. Her story became legend not because of television cameras or tabloids, but because she had stood for justice when it mattered most. The lesson she left behind was simple yet powerful. You can bury a man, you can tarnish a name, you can rewrite history, but you can never destroy the truth when someone is willing to stand for it. And so, the streets of Harlem remembered Bumpy Johnson not just as a gangster, but as a man who protected his people, and Mai Johnson as the woman who carried that truth forward. When the lights dimmed and the city slept, she knew she had done more than survive. She had made history.